Hello, uh, or aloha. Welcome to the first ever episode of This Could Get Bad with Dr. Matty Hands, me. Um, Give you guys a quick introduction, breakdown before we kind of dive right into this and get to know a little bit more about me and why this is something I want to talk about and why I feel it's fine time. So, uh, again, I'm Dr. Matty Hands. I have a PhD in parapsychology and paranormal sciences, which is essentially falls under the umbrella of pseudoscience and kind of the study of things that we have yet to prove and quantify through science and measurable, uh, repetitive experiments. So, for instance, like how do you prove you had a dream? How do you, um, prove an intuition? Uh, how do you through the spidey senses you get when you walk into a room and you just feel the energy is off. We all experience these things, and it's just not repeatable and measurable enough for it to be, you know, a not pseudoscience, but it's under that umbrella of metaphysics. So this could get bad. It's a disclosure cycle that I'm working on, and a guide descent into the truth, and what I hope leads us to it. So how we got here. Again, my name is Dr. Matty Hands, and for the better part of my life, I've been orbiting the same questions that most people try not to think about. What is actually going on behind the curtain? What aren't we being told? And why does my gut tell me that there's a lot more to this story? I didn't get here by accident, and I definitely didn't get here through a straight, clean, tidy academic pipeline. My life path is a collage of military, music, metaphysics, trauma, reinvention, intuition, and a few too many UFO sightings pretend that they were just aircraft. And I also have a stubborn refusal to let anyone tell me what reality is supposed to look like. I've lived on Maui for about 15 years, a couple years of that, 2 years on Oahu, a little 15 years. Um, and it's long enough to know people, energy, community, and recognize sky patterns. I was born in Orange County, California, raised in Wakanda, Illinois, and was never meant to be the guy that blended in. If anything, my life has been one long essay explaining why conformity and truth rarely coexist. I joined the Air Force in March 2003, March 18th, 2003 was the day I went in, and that just is literally the day that second Gulf War kicked off. Operation Iraqi Freedom kicked off that day. Um, I was a punk kid who somehow decided maintaining $150 million aircraft was the next logical step after TPing your house. So I was definitely not cut from a cookie cutter cloth or any sort of measure of nothing that would lead to this trajectory. I trained in Naval Air Station Pensacola, doing sheet metal, and then my first base was Warner Robins, Georgia, from September 2003 to September 2005. That base I worked on C5s, occasional C-130s, occasional C1 or C-17s. I worked on some of the last few C-141s before those went on to be like static displays or light power signature space. I have some funny stories about those days. Um, and then I ended up getting assigned to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska, which is in Anchorage, from end of 2005 to the end of 2009. And a couple years into that, I went from working at a corrosion facility, which we sanded and painted planes, parts, missiles, stuff like that. So we saw the camouflage pattern on F-15s. That's what my shop did. Um, I had a lot of chemical exposure there, screwed up my shoulder, ended up leading me where I'm at now, and I'll get to that later on. But was eventually seconded into the F-22 bed down program, where they made it sound kind of glorious that we were working on the F-22 as uh, low observable maintainers, called the LO, and that was just maintaining the stealth applications of the planes and inspecting those and all the maintenance rigmarole that goes along with that. But it came with really high end clearances. So I had top secret clearance. Um, I also had special access program clearance and SCI, secure compartmentalized information, where we very frequently worked in and out of SCIFs, secure compartmentalized information facilities. Um, and with all that lovely government secrecy comes, all everything that comes with painting ghosts in the sky. Um, Eventually, my injuries, including ulcers and four shoulder surgeries, the bureaucracy, and the classic government mentality of can't work, you're a liability mentality, kind of pushed me out in 2009 and got out with a honorable discharge, and here I am. So I rebooted myself. After that, I went to college in Chicago, a suburb in Schaumburg, for audio production and engineering at the Illinois Institute of Art in Schaumburg. And after that, used the rest of my GA bill to go to school in Honolulu at Dwight Pacific University for integrated multimedia. And there's a lot that happens between then and now. Um, Later, I got my another bachelor's in metaphysical sciences, then a master's, and then eventually my PhD in parapsychology and environmental sciences. Um, and that's where I wrote my dissertation that is going to be kind of the groundwork for what I talk about moving forward from here. So buckle up. I called it a theological analysis of impacts to human psyche, societal, religious, and governmental structures upon UFO UAP disclosure. And that dissertation, again, is the backbone of this podcast. But this show isn't an audiobook. It's not an academic lecture, and this isn't Maddie Reed's dissertation. This is me translating it into something alive, accessible, human, and real, the way it was always meant to be. Because disclosure, real disclosure, will never come from white paper. It will come from conversations, trust, courage, and the willingness to look at fear without flinching. So with that, let's begin. Chapter 1 was the foundations of the phenomenon. When I open the conversation, it's not just dropping listeners into UFO talk. I'm laying out the terrain, the psychological, historical, political, and philosophical landscape that makes this topic so heavy, so contentious, and very much so overdue. This chapter is me pulling the curtain back on the real stakes of disclosure, because before you can get to whether humanity is alone, you first have to ask a much quieter question, which is, why has this topic been treated so radioactive for nearly 80 years? And once you ask that, almost everything else just kind of follows. The roots of secrecy. In my dissertation, I made the simple but uncomfortable point that secrecy didn't begin because the public couldn't handle the truth. It began because institutions couldn't handle the consequences of honesty. Historically, UAP, UFO secrecy has been framed as purely national security. Adversaries might steal recovered tech. Weapon systems might be compromised. Intelligence gaps might be exposed. That's the definition of the rubric that kind of comes along with every reason why government official can't say about what is going on. It's a national security issue. Sure, parts of that are true. Unequivocally, like there's some things we don't want our adversaries to know that we're capable of, and they're doing the same thing. But it's all built on an unnecessary lie. That's my opinion, my perspective. Uh, so those concerns aren't imaginary. They've shaped policy, the funding pipelines, and classification framework going back to the 1940s. But buried beneath all that rationale is a part no one really wants to say out loud, which is secrecy protects institutions far more than it protects the public. Do you agree or disagree? I outlined in my research how post World War II intelligence agencies quickly weaponized the narrative control. Once flying discs entered public consciousness in 1947, the national security establishment had three competing fears. Well, one, the Soviets might have breakthrough tech. Fair, that's fair. Basis of the whole Cold War. Or two, the U.S. might be caught unprepared. It's like getting caught with our pants down. You think the U.S. wants that? Not so much, especially with the hubris that we had after World War II and the boomers that kind of came along with that. America's the best. That's kind of the mentality that was running America at that point. Number three, the public might panic and destabilize confidence in the governor. I think that's the real kicker. Uh, Government fearing its people, its citizens, which is exactly how it should be. But the exact reason why they shouldn't perpetuate the lies that have been going on for so long, and we're just now getting the gusto to talk about. That third one, like I was just saying, is the public panic argument. It was never supported by evidence, it is supported by an assumption. And those assumptions are hardening into doctrine. From then on, secrecy wasn't a policy, it was their identity. What disclosure really threatens. And what I emphasized early on in my dissertation is that disclosure isn't just about confirming extraterrestrial life. It's about detonating the narratives that governments, religions, and institutions depend on. Every major institution has vulnerable push points. Governments, they fear the loss and control of accountability. Religions, they fear reinterpretation of sacred narratives. Economies, they fear disruption and technological monopolies. Academia fears overturning consensus based knowledge. And what I mean by that is rewriting all the history books, like everything that we've been taught, everything that has been taught to us is not necessarily all true or true at all. So I'll delve into that quite a bit more. And the militaries, they fear losing superiority and appearing incompetent. It's not necessarily their fault. The military is just doing what their governments tell them to do. Um, this is why disclosure has always been treated as a civilian level risk. Not because aliens landing on the White House lawn would break us, but because the truth would break the illusions that society was built on. So think about that for a second. And if that resonates, there's probably something to that for you. If not, like maybe that this is not for you. And I state this directly in my dissertation. Quote, the societal and psychological impacts of disclosure could lead to profound shifts in religious and philosophical beliefs, worldviews, and institutional trust. These aren't fringe fears, they're systemic. Um, Moving on to the human mind under impact. One of the central themes in my work is the ontological shock, the psychological blow that comes when new information collapses your senses or your sense of what you think and what you know is possible. The challenge with UAP and UFO disclosure isn't evidence, it's identity. Humans don't fear aliens inherently. They fear losing the version of the reality anchored to themselves. We've grown up with them being no more than conspiracy theory What if all along it's been true, and the people that have told you that, oh, those are crackpots, those are just crazy people, are the ones that have been lying the whole time. That can be a little bit of a mindfuck. And one of the main key elements of this is confirmation bias. Um, and that runs the show more than logic. And as I explained in my dissertation, confirmation bias shapes individual perspectives and perpetuates polarized debates on, especially UAP and UFOs. It's a central obstacle to objective evaluation. Some people will accept anything that proves aliens exist, such as very devout religious people will explain everything good or bad as God's will. You know, there's fanatics out there that any reason that they can find to say like aliens this, they see a shooting star, to them might as well be a UFO. I'm not in that group of thinking, but I'm open to all sorts of things these days. Um, disclosure forces both extremes to collapse inward. And that's exactly why I'm creating this podcast. Because if we don't normalize the conversation now, if we don't build the cognitive room for possibilities, contradictions, and the paradigm shifts, when the day that disclosure arrives, society won't just react, it'll fracture. So my goal with this chapter is to slow that fracture before it starts and kind of give us all a little bit of mental headspace space in how to prepare for such things. Um, what we can learn from past cover-ups, and here's where history kind of gets uncomfortable. Not because of alien craft, but because of human behavior. In my dissertation, I outlined how disinformation programs, propaganda campaigns, intelligence manipulation, selective leaks, and ridicule strategies were used to shape public belief and not just keep secrets. Most people have never heard of the Robertson Panel in 1953, the CIA psychological operations around UFO sightings around that same period of time, aggressive debunking campaigns from the 60s through the 80s, even uh, spearheading through today, or the modern classification loopholes around private contractors to bury aerospace research where FOIA records can't touch her. FOIA records are a Freedom of Information Act there. Anyone can request certain documents and it goes through classification declassification cycle where person who requested it can publicly release those records. We all can do that, but it doesn't work as great as you would think it would. So these aren't conspiracies, they're documented facts. And they reveal the truth, one truth, which is secrecy erodes public trust more than disclosure ever could. The cover ups, they do more damage than the phenomena ever would. Maintaining a lie, no matter what it is, I'm pretty sure in every single one of our lives, we either call it or spread a lie or been victim to a lie that once we found it out later on in life, it changed everything. And we all have our own experiences with that. And this is really no different except this one's collective. This was all of us. The last part of chapter one is me explaining why this topic isn't theoretical anymore. This isn't just aliens, maybe. Because whether you believe any craft are extraterrestrial or not, the conversation itself is becoming unavoidable. And that's where I end chapter one. My research aims to uncover hidden patterns, contextualize the phenomena within our collective history, and identify the themes that emerge repeatedly. Only with that foundation can meaningful analysis begin. And this podcast is part of that foundation, not as entertainment, not a sensationalism, but as a preparation. This is me trying to do my part. So with that, that's the end of chapter one, and pick this back up on chapter two onward, and this is where everyone else starts getting involved.